Chapter 31 Why? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It was such a small world. The two greeted Yi Si right after they joined the party. Gongzi, what a coincidence, we're here for the fun, but we only found guild parties. We were just about to leave and then we saw somebody looking for party members. We never thought that it'll be you. We joined immediately without thinking. Icy cold little hands idolized Yi Si, she was happy to be in her party. I was wondering, had all the healers and tanks lost their jobs? Yi Si was happy to see people that she was familiar with. Their skills were not that good, but she knew their strengths and weaknesses, having already partied with them before. It would be easier to control the situation once they entered the dungeon. Wow! Both of you are from the freaking awesome people. You're the ones who got first blood on Icy Cave hard difficulty. Timely Rain and Pickled Pepper Phoenix Claw said excitedly. Normally, little Icy Cold Hands would have bragged about it. But he could not bring himself to do so in front of Yi Si. He scratched his head awkwardly and asserted, it's just a coincidence. Just a coincidence. Those two underestimated the power of idols. Despite little Icy Cold Hands' reserved behavior, Timely Rain and Pickled Pepper Phoenix Claw treated him warmly. Yi Si sighed. She was also part of the people who cleared it, you know. Have you guys completed the prerequisite quest? Asked Yi Si. Yes, replied the four collectively. With the average player progressing towards the chilly wetlands, even those without a party would have the common sense to complete the prerequisite quest just in case. Yi Si nodded her head and led the four into the cruel pit. Just before she entered the dungeon, Yi Si's private voice message channel rang. The conversation also appeared in her text message channel. The person had a Fate logo beside his name in the word channel. It was a Fate official. Hello, I am customer service number 094. Miss Gongzi, do you still remember me? Yes, what do you want? It was Wang Jiangnan. Yi Si was bewildered. Why was a person from the development team looking for her? Was he taking back her pet egg? We've been studying the bug that you submitted. It is in the opinion of the entire development team that this bug is impossible to be exploited. Are you hiding the presence of other bugs? Wang Jiangnan was in a difficult position. He knew that Yi Si could kill the sandstorm scorpion with the bug and he had reported it after investigating her movement records. Of course, he could not tell that to his boss. He would be fired. He could only try his best to explain the bug reported by Yi Si to his bosses and tell Yi Si about the results of the investigation. Yi Si was momentarily puzzled. She then answered coldly, since you do not believe me, why are you here? Handing out punishment. Confiscating my loot. No, Miss Gongzi. The development team wishes for you to demonstrate the bug you used to kill the sandstorm scorpion so that we can confirm the problem and fix the bug. Wang Jiangnan sighed. He knew that it was almost a mission impossible. Yi Si remained silent as if she did not hear his words. She stayed with the party in the gloomy dungeons, clearing away the occasional monster. The first floor of the cruel pit was slightly brighter. Scattered rays of light shone in from the cracks of the ceiling. The glittering light made the atmosphere even scarier. The mobs on this floor was scattered and it was easy to take care of them. The party could even joke around as they progressed through the floor. Miss Gongzi, what do you think of my proposal? Wang Jiangnan was desperate when he received no response from Yi Si. He was the one who reported the bug to the higher-ups. If it turned out to be a fraud, his bonus for the month would be gone. He might even lose his position in the development team that was planning the release of a new trailer. Money did not matter to him. But if he was kicked out of the development team, it would be truly troubling. But it was impossible for him to tell that to Yi Si. Thus, he could only urge her to make up her mind faster. Yi Si gave the matter a moment of consideration before she replied, why? It made Wang Jiangnan speechless. Then again, it had always been that way. Players had no obligation to report a bug. To repair a bug was the official's responsibility. It had nothing to do with the players. And to seek help from a player to repair a bug without any reason. Exactly. Why? Wang Jiangnan did not know what to say, but he couldn't just hang up like that. As such, the two continued to remain silent. It was Yi Ci who spoke first. If you can let me have all the dropped items, I'll do it again. Wang Jiangnan immediately relayed Yi Ci's condition to the higher-up and it was approved immediately. They agreed that if Yi Ci could get in touch with customer service number 094 whenever she was free, they could work together to repair the bug. The party was preparing to enter the second floor just as the conversation ended. Little Icy Cold Hands was curious about Yi Ci's silence. She was talking to customer service number 094, and asked, "Gongzi, you're quiet today." Yi Ci was puzzled. Was she normally very noisy? Then what do you want me to say? It's just that. It's weird to not hear you giving out orders in the dungeon. A smile lit up the pale face underneath the dim light. Be careful on the second floor, the mobs are no longer scattered. They'll be swarming us. How do you know? Before Timely Rain could finish his sentence, loud noises emanated from all around them. A horde of skeletons were rising from the ground and moved slowly towards the party. The dim light in the dungeon shone on the bits of rotten flesh that still hung loosely off the skeletons, making for a horrible sight. Icy Cold Little Hands let out a yelp and fell onto the stairs. Timely Rain also had his wits scared out of him by the skeleton horde. The party would be annihilated at this rate. Yi Ci pulled Timely Rain backwards and shouted at Little Cold Icy Hands, "Little Cold Icy Hands, have you learnt charge?" Little Cold Icy Hands was also shivering out of fear, but when his name was mentioned, he regained his wits and answered, "Yes." Charge at them. Charge at the place where they're most concentrated. Charge was a warrior's only means of building up mass aggro. It could attract the aggro of 8 monsters at most along its trajectory. Little Cold Icy Hands charged at the skeletons, and a sharp sound resounded when his armor collided with the skeletons. OL-3 followed close behind Little Cold Icy Hands and attracted the attention of the skeletons around him, relieving some of the pressure from him. At the same time, Yi Ci fired arrows at the skeletons and, with her high balance, began kiting them without attracting the attention of more skeletons. Yi Ci finally found the time to give instructions to the 3 mage-classed players who had lost their morale. Warlock, cast Frost Beam. Aim for the skeletons nearest to the healer and the sorcerer. Healer, don't just stand there, heal the tank. Sorcerer, attack whichever target that the warrior is attacking, be careful of what you hit. Control your aggro, be careful not to OT. Icy Cold Little Hands were frightened by the horrifying scene. She would have cried out loud if not for Yi Ci. She suppressed her fear, raised her staff with a trembling hand, and healed Little Cold Icy Hands. Despite being men, Pickled Pepper, Phoenix Claw and Timely Rain did not fare any better. With the scenery assaulting their senses, they would have been in utter confusion if not for Yi Ci's instructions. With Yi Ci's careful and precise instructions, the party slowly got used to her orders and her combat style. With Yi Ci's perfect positioning and controls, their fear of the skeletons decreased and they began to fight with order. But the GS of the 2 DPS was too low, which badly affected their damage output. It was Yi Ci's superior equipment that raised the party's damage output. The battle ended. All of them sat on the ground, tired and sweating. Yi Ci threw a piece of roasted meat at OL-3 and patted its head, and to show its happiness, OL-3 rubbed its head against Yi Ci's thigh. A pale-faced Little Icy Cold Hands looked at Yi Ci but detected no hint of unusualness on her. Even her facial expression remained the same. He sighed and said, "Gongzi, you're brave. Aren't you afraid of this scary dungeon?" Yi Ci laughed. She was tempted to tell them that there were even scarier dungeons in the later stages of Fate. Cruel Pit was just the tip of the iceberg. She replied with half of the truth, it's just a game. It's not real. There's nothing to be afraid of. The rest of the party sighed and shook their heads. They were impressed by Yi Si. After resting for a short moment, Yi Si said, let's go, there are more skeletons ahead. Be careful. The group gulped, and clutched their weapons tightly. Chapter 32 Cleared. Cruel Pit. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Cruel Pit was the introductory dungeon to the Chili Wetlands. Its design was different from the other dungeons within the Chili Wetlands. The dungeon itself was themed after Gothic horror. The entire dungeon was filled with an eerie atmosphere, and players who enter it for the first time were likely to be affected by the psychological induction of fear and ended up underperforming. That was one of the reasons why a dungeon that was not exactly hard bogged down the progress of millions of Fate players for quite a while. Yi Si could remember herself being scared senseless when she first entered this dungeon. The only solution offered by the forums at the current stage was to watch more horror films to build up the resistance to the horror-themed dungeon. It was useless. One would never be able to relate to the horror when one was watching a film as they were not directly experiencing it. The only way to overcome such fear was to visit the dungeon more often. After experiencing the dungeon for at most 10 times, the fear of seeing skeletons with bits of meat hanging loosely off them will start to fade. And what was the second key to clearing this dungeon, one might ask? It was, of course, damage output and puzzle solving. The damage output required was an issue for a lot of players. In Yi Si's knowledge, an average player must possess at least 150 GS to clear the dungeon. Even with someone like her around, the average GS of the party members must reach 130. Without reaching this condition, their attacks might not even be able to penetrate the boss's defense. Although Timely Rain and Phoenix Claw in her party did not have more than 100 GS, Little Icy Cold Hands and Icy Cold Little Hands had 140 GS. As long as she moved faster, her party could clear the dungeon easily. As for the puzzle, Yi Si looked up into the sky, it all depended on luck. For example, the puzzle currently faced by the party was one that tested the dexterity of one's thoughts. The door leading to the first boss was in a small square patio. 4 chairs were set at each corner of the room, and when the puzzle was activated, only one player of the party could try to solve it, while the 4 other party members had to sit on the chairs. One mistake could possibly end the lives of the other 4 members. Yi Si made a slight mistake, and Little Icy Cold Hands was impaled by a spike that suddenly rose off the ground. He was left with only the slightest amount of HP. He was scared shitless and yelled, "Gongzi, you must be careful, be careful." Luckily it was me who got impaled, if it was the others, they would have died. Ah, it was a mistake, it won't happen the next time. Yi Si nodded and chuckled. You're taking revenge on me. Icy Cold Little Hands cried. Something clicked, and the door opened. Yi Si straightened up and walked towards the door. The 4 asked with uncertainty, "It's done?" "Of course." The 4 immediately jumped off the chairs and rushed into the first boss's room after offering different sorts of prayers. The first and second bosses were defeated easily. After being in the scary dungeon for 3 hours, the group was finally used to the atmosphere. Eventually, they reached the door leading to the third and final boss. The third boss of Cruel Pit was the head warden Tito. Cruel Pit was crowned as the milestone of the humanization of the AI. It was not because of the difficulty of the dungeon. It was due to the fact that the final boss of this dungeon, Tito, was the first high-intelligence boss that players encountered in the game. A conventional boss was designed to follow several programs, but Tito used his own wits to bring out the maximum potential of his skills. This was the hardest factor in the entire dungeon, and part of the reason why many players were bogged down in this dungeon. They could not figure out a pattern to Tito's attacks. Timely Rain, have you learned Exhaust? Exhaust was the only debuff skill that a warlock possessed. Exhaust reduces the target's attack damage by 30% for 8 seconds. Despite that, it had a 20 seconds cooldown. It was one of the life-saving skills. I did, Timely Rain nodded. He did not dare to continue. He'd never used the skill before. Okay, Tito will have a skill called Anger. When you see the skill channeling, use Exhaust on him. Got it. Timely Rain learned a lot about positioning after partying with Yi Si. He'd even mastered skills that he normally would not use and had got used to the casting timing. It could be said that he had benefited a lot. He only had the mindset of exploration when he first entered the dungeon. He was thoroughly impressed by this huntress. He couldn't help but imagine that they could clear this dungeon under her guidance. Phoenix Claw, have you learned Weaken? Yi Si asked because most beginners did not have many coins with them and were forced to selectively learn skills. They sometimes would overlook skills that were crucial in dungeons and PvP. Let me see, I could have sworn that I learned it. Phoenix Claw's face was red with embarrassment. He finally found Weaken in his skills panel. Yes, I've learned it. When Timely Rain's exhaust duration is finished, cast Weaken immediately. Weaken has a low cooldown, you can keep using it. But you must take care not to use it when exhaust is still in effect, they will cancel each other out. It will greatly increase the pressure for the MT and the healer. With the exception of Phoenix Claw, all the members of the party were fast learners. Despite being a slow learner, Phoenix Claw was a good follower, he followed every instruction to the letter. I understand. Gongzi, they're not going to attack the boss. Little Icy Cold Hands asked. He noticed that Yi Si only instructed the two to use debuff on the boss, but did not mention a word about them attacking. Yi Si shook her head, this boss has a high GS requirement. Players that are not LVL 15 can't even damage the boss without 180 GS. It would just be a waste their mana. It's better if they spend all of their mana on debuffs. At least they would be able to keep some of the pressure off you. The four of them were afraid, seeing as only Little Cold Icy Hands had reached LVL 15. The others were not even LVL 15 yet. They began to sweat profusely. Gongzi, if that's the case, can we clear this dungeon? Timely Rain's confidence was slightly shaken. Yi Si could understand his thoughts. She looked at Timely Rain and affirmed, in a dungeon, it's either the boss or us, there's nothing to be afraid of. Even if we die 10 times, we'll only lose half a level worth of experience. With some work, we can get those back within a week. What? Can't bear the loss. With Yi Si's words, and seeing that nobody else had the intention to leave, Timely Rain kept quiet and forced himself to stay. Phoenix Claw said, you're a guy, act like one. Are you going or nah? The treasure chest is waiting for us, don't be a pussy. Timely Rain was a shy person, with the words of Phoenix Claw, he was too embarrassed to leave. He gritted his teeth, let's go. At the next moment, the battle started immediately. Icy Cold Little Hands, Timely Rain and Phoenix Claw stood together, distancing themselves in a straight line 20 m away from Little Icy Cold Hands. Yi Si stood between them, acting as a barrier. All they needed to do at the beginning of the fight was to stand still and dish out damage, nothing else was really needed. 5 minutes later, Tito grabbed the hem of Little Icy Cold Hands angrily, intending to throw him aside. If it's not for Little Icy Cold Hands' reaction speed, he would have been thrown away. Tito shouted in a loud voice, damned ants, you've pissed me off. Yi Si was shocked, in her countless visit to the dungeon, she'd never seen Tito combining the skills of anger and ignite together. She shouted, you three, move in the same direction as I do after exhaust is cast, don't stay in the area of his attack. Timely Rain immediately cast exhaust. Just as Yi Si's voice died down, flames burst out of Tito's mouth in a fan shape. Players within the affected area suffered sustained and serious burn damage. The three mage-classed players were immediately put into a state of disarray. Noticing that little icy cold hands was nearly dead, Yi Si drank a bottle of rage potion and took the aggro of the boss away from him with a few critical hits. She released OL3 to the front line as a meat shield. The four of you hurry up and recover your health with potions and bandages. We'll do it again. Yi Si said and began kiting Tito in the small room. In Fate, the combat state would not be removed unless the entire party left the area or was annihilated. It was not worth to die just like that, and Yi Si refused to exit the dungeon, leaving behind a boss that only had 37% of its health left. She immediately instructed the members of her party to recover themselves. The four of them were gasping for air by that time. The three mage-classed players were especially ashamed of their performance. They used the best consumables they had. After healing up, little cold icy hands charged up to Tito and took over the aggro with the help of Phoenix Claw. Yi Si immediately returned OL3 to the pet storage and went back to her position. By that time, they were used to Tito's tricks. They dodged his ignite with ease. There were occasions where time passes real quick, and there were also occasions where time was slow. Half an hour was normally not a long period of time, but in the party's situation, it felt like 10,000 years. Tito's hit points finally hit 1% and Yi Si immediately reminded her party members, "Be careful, he will now randomly release an ultimate skill." At that moment, Tito began to channel the skill Mutual Destruction. Yi Si was shocked, nobody had the skill that could cancel other skills at this point. If this ultimate skill was successfully released, it would deal 999,999 points of damage, annihilating everything in the area. She chugged down another bottle of rage potion. "Please don't let me die now, come on, let me have a critical hit. Armor break." Yi Si shouted, and cast rapid fire. At the same time, a weakened debuff appeared on Tito. Critical hit. Armor break. 3749. Chapter 33 F***CK off. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mutual Destruction's channeling was finally cancelled and the countdown timer hit 0.03 seconds. Tito's softened body crumpled onto the ground, and he did not move again. Suddenly, an eerie silence crept over the pit. The group could not believe the scene unfolding before them. Tito had actually died. Icy cold little hands even pinched his own face while mumbling, "Did our party get annihilated? Are we standing here as spirits?" While the four were stunned, Yi Si was not. She took a deep breath. It was finally over. That was so surreal. "Do you want to keep the guild name and party ID hidden?" The system announcement immediately popped out after Tito had fallen. Yi Si chose no. It was not the time to stay hidden. After all, getting first blood on this dungeon will raise the prestige of the guild. One must go on tolling the bell as long as one was a monk. As she was a member of Steel-Blooded Battle Spear, she should at least fulfill her minimum duties as a guild member. Congratulations Steel-Blooded Battle Spear's 5 members for being the first in the world to achieve first blood for the Cruel Pit Dungeon. Rewards: 500 guild prestige points. Let us remember their names. Congratulations Gongzi for clearing the Cruel Pit. Rewards: 100 gold coins, 1000 global prestige points, 2 talent points. Congratulations Timely Rain for clearing the Cruel Pit. Rewards: 100 gold coins, 1000 global prestige points, 1 talent point. Congratulations Phoenix Claw for clearing the Cruel Pit. Rewards: 100 gold coins, 1000 global prestige points, 1 talent point. Congratulations Little Icy Cold Hands for clearing the Cruel Pit. Rewards: 100 gold coins, 1000 global prestige points, 1 talent point. Congratulations Icy Cold Little Hands for clearing the Cruel Pit. Rewards: 100 gold coins, 1000 global prestige points, 1 talent point. The world message channel was spammed by the red words of the system announcement. At that moment, the entire world exploded. The group's friends channel began beeping non-stop. Little Icy Cold Hands and Icy Cold Little Hands had already experienced such matters and immediately muted their channels. Timely Rain and Phoenix Claw finally were able to mute their friend chat channel and the world returned to silence. Gong Ziyu. You went out with a wild party, am I right? Peacock Blue's message reached Yi Ci just as she was about to mute her private message channel. We did not have a MT and a healer, so that's why I randomly looked for 2 more extra members. Little Icy Cold Hands and Icy Little Cold Hands were the ones who cleared Icy Cave with you, and you tell me you met them by chance. Do you think that I'm an idiot? Peacock Blue raised her voice after hearing Yi Ci's neutral tone. Are you trying to help them get equipments? So what? You're the one who asked me to look for members on my own. But I did not ask you to form a wild party. The achievement belongs to the guild. What do you mean by wild party? Yi Ci furrowed her eyebrows. She had never liked having arguments over trivial matters, but Peacock Blue was doing exactly that. Do not give them any equipments, you must hand in all MT and healer equipments. Peacock Blue continued after a pause, give the MT equipments to Thousand Sunsets, send the healer equipments directly to me. Yi Ci narrowed her eyes, her expression turning cold. This woman, Yi Ci was too lazy to deal with her, but she thought that she could bully her. Finding fault with her, like that, did she think that Yi Ci was just someone soft? Yi Ci said in a cold voice, cut the nonsense, F***ck off. She then turned off her private message channel and muted that woman. Although Yi Ci's channels finally became quiet again, Peacock Blue that was rejected and then scolded by her was extremely agitated. She shouted in the guild channel, Gong Ziyu. Who do you think you are? Clearing a dungeon with a wild party. I would have let it slide if you handed in the equipments, but you told me to F***ck off. Who do you think you are? Tell you what, if you hand in the equipment for MT and healer right away, I'll let you off the hook, if you don't, I'll kick you out right away. Don't you think you'll be getting any money from us? Little Icy Cold Hands and Icy Cold Little Hands were not guild members of Steel-Blooded Battle Spear and had no access to the guild channel. They did not know what was occurring between the two. Timely Rain and Pickled Pepper Phoenix Claw were stunned after reading Peacock Blue's words. They looked at Yi Ci, but she shook her hand, signaling that she did not mind at all. Ignore her, we'll split the loot, and sell anything that we can't use. But Timely Rain was wary of Peacock Blue. After all, she was an administrator in the guild and had some power. He was afraid to offend her. But what? These items are more important. In the worst-case scenario, you can just go join another guild. A lot of them are recruiting, just what are you afraid of? Pepper Pickled Phoenix Claw was way smarter than Timely Rain. Like Yi Ci, he paid no heed to Peacock Blue. Gong Ziyu. I will kick you out of the guild. Peacock Blue was already in a state of rage when she was ignored by Yi Ci. At that moment, a system message flashed across the screen. Peacock Blue has been stripped of her admin rights by Thousand Sunsets. 1,000. Peacock Blue screamed. Thousands of guild members were either waiting for Peacock Blue to continue her rage or were waiting for Gong Ziyu's response, but nothing else surfaced in the guild channel. Something happened in your guild. Little Icy Cold Hands immediately guessed that it had something to do with Yi Ci's guild. It's nothing, just some petty quarreling in the guild, Pepper Pickled Phoenix Claw laughed. I see, this is why I don't want to join a guild, too troublesome. Little Icy Cold Hands scratched his head and looked at Yi Ci, Gongzi, are you going to pick up the loot? If you're not gonna do it, I'm going to pick up all of them. Yi Ci smiled at Timely Rain and Pepper Pickled Phoenix Claw, which one of you has a better luck? Go open the chests, pointing at the 3 glimmering chests at the corner. Cruel Pit was a dungeon that a lot would prefer not to revisit after clearing it once. Other than its eerie theme, the loot was also given in a very disgusting way. Players would only obtain a treasure chest key each from the first and second boss. They can only obtain the rewards after defeating the third boss and open the treasure chests behind it with the keys dropped from slaying each boss. Frankly speaking, if one could not clear the dungeon, it's a waste of one's effort. The two shook their heads, stating that they were members of the Black Hand, Unlucky, Army. The mission of opening the boxes fell to Little Icy Cold Hands and Icy Cold Little Hands. Their luck were unprecedented. Other than the quest items to activate the rest of the dungeon cluster, they obtained 6 blue equipment that were fully LVL-15. Sadly, none of them were bows or crossbows. Yi Si could only watch as they distributed their new weapons. The Barbarian 2-handed axe and the Druid staff that were left over were sold in the auction house and the profits would split between the 5 party members. Yi Si couldn't help but suspect if she would only had the luck with skill books in her current life. The 3 chests gave them 17 pieces of equipments in total, and they got 1 or 2 each, with the exception of Pepper Pickled Phoenix Claw, who obtained 3 items. Yi Si was the only one who did not get anything other than 2 skill books. The drop rates of skill books, however, was in an entirely different realm when compared an equipment's drop rate. With Yi Si's 2 new skill books, it's worth it. Frost Trap. Deploying it along the opponent's movement path will freeze the target for 12 seconds. Cooldown: 30 seconds. Poison. Coat the user's weapon with poison, target will be poisoned along the skill's duration. All physical damage against targets will have the poison effect. Duration: 60 seconds. Cooldown: 90 seconds. Class: Rogue, Hunter, Ranger. Some of the classes in Fate will share similar skills. Poison was a skill used by Rogue, Hunter, and Ranger classes. It's one of the best skills for assassination and killing boss. The 5 added each other as friends after splitting up the loot and left the dungeon. Yi Si went back to Red Lake City and cleared the daily quest and obtained the salary pack containing 50 silver coins and 50 military honor points. Just as Yi Si was about to go offline after sorting out her item storage, a pigeon approached her. It was Lu Chang. She had heard about Yi Si's confrontation with Peacock Blue after leaving a dungeon upon her death. Nothing, I don't think it's anything big. Yi Si dismissed it as something petty. Even if you don't mind, that B*TCH might not feel the same. She thought that everybody should listen to her. She might have added much more oil to the fire when complaining to Thousand Sunsets, said Lu Chang coldly. She can say what she wants. It's not like my life depends on her. If worst comes to the worst, I'll just leave, not that I care. Yi Si yawned, appearing to not even care about the topic. I'm so tired, getting a first blood is not easy, I'll go to sleep. Lu Chang did not say much to Yi Si with her current condition. She said goodbye to Yi Si, and went offline as well. Yi Si had not eaten for the entire day while exploring the dungeon. With her exerting so much of her attention in the game, she did not feel hungry. However, hunger assaulted her senses as soon as she went offline. She went to bed after a quick meal and was asleep the moment her head touched her pillow. After an unknown period of time, her phone rang. Yi Si buried her head in her blanket and continued sleeping, not paying heed to the phone call. But the caller did not give up, and the phone rang on and on to the point where Yi Si had to pick up the call. It was Yi Tsang. Yi Tsang seemed to be contacting her frequently nowadays, thought a sleep-addled Yi Si. Little Si, let's have a meal together tomorrow. Your dad gave you more pocket money. No, brother, he said that it's a guild activity. Which brother he? Yi Si was still groggy. He shall, Thousand Sunsets. Yi Si's mind immediately cleared. To call her out for a meal at this time. It did not seem like a good timing. Yi Si could not help but remember the events that occurred in the afternoon. Translator note. Due to previous mistranslation, Steel-Blooded Battle Axe will now be renamed as Steel-Blooded Battle Spear. Chapter 34 Flutter and Sway. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Reason number 1, Yi Tsang found it hard to suppress her own joy out of excitement. Number 2, she couldn't really afford to miss the activity organized by the Guildmaster since she was still in the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear Guild. Third and most importantly, she wanted to know what kind of trickery Thousand Sunsets was trying to pull off. However, Yi Ci didn't really get to interact much with Thousand Sunsets the next day. Both of them had only met with each other at the specified restaurant. He Xiao looked like he was in a hurry, but he still wore a friendly smile on his face upon seeing Yi Ci. "Oh, it's you, Gongzi. Hurry and go upstairs, they are all in the big private room on the 3rd floor. I'll excuse myself for a while since I have some business to attend to, but I'll be back soon." As soon as he finished his sentence, he let the smiling man who had escorted him down earlier to bring Yi Ci upstairs at once. He then briskly walked towards a luxury car that was parked at the roadside, opened the door, got in, and pulled away. Yi Ci took a glance at that car. Although she couldn't really accurately estimate its price value, she could easily tell that it was worth at least a few million just from its brand. "Let's head up," the man beside her reminded Yi Ci with a smile. Yi Ci gave him a nod and followed behind him as they walked upstairs. This man introduced himself with a smile. "I'm Zero Arsenic, the Vice Guildmaster." The moment Yi Ci heard the name Zero Arsenic, she couldn't help but to take another few good look at this man. So he was Zero Arsenic. Although Guildmaster of the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear Guild was Thousand Sunsets, according to the experience of the previous generation, this man was the guild's true mastermind. "How do you do?" Yi Ci nodded as she gave a greeting that was neither humble nor pert. She didn't show much enthusiasm either. This was somewhat a surprise to Zero Arsenic. Most members were enthusiastic to meet him, but this person was quite unusual. "You are Gongzia, right?" Yi Ci wasn't much of a conversationalist and Zero Arsenic didn't want the atmosphere to turn awkward either. Hence, he took the initiative to converse with her as they climbed the stairs. "Yes. The first time I saw that name, I thought you would be a guy." Zero Arsenic's gaze never once left Yi Ci's face when he was speaking, wanting to catch any trace of emotions on her face. But much to his disappointment, the expression on Yi Ci's face remained placid. There was neither excitement nor the intention to converse further. Even her replies to him were dull and a little inarticulate. It was randomized by the system. The invitation today to Yi Ci was not Thousand Sunsets' idea, but Zero Arsenic's. Her name, Gongzia, was in 2 first kills and she had caught Zero Arsenic's attention. Although Peacock Blue was 100% sure that the GS of this equipment was only 85, the icy cave was cleared because of a good team. However, something still felt off to him. After she had once again claimed the first kill of the cruel pit boss, Warden Tito, Zero Arsenic immediately contacted Timely Rain and Pickled Pepper Chicken Feet who had just exited the dungeon. The two of them were immediately singing praises of this huntress' control and command, as if it had been raining flowers. It was nothing like what Peacock Blue had said. This had greatly piqued Zero Arsenic's interest in Gongzia. As the proverb says, "Money can make the devil push the millstone." Or even better, problems that can be solved by money are not problems. And so, he had actually paid someone yesterday evening to investigate Gongzia's past. The result that turned up had him screaming in excitement. He didn't expect at all that this somewhat pale girl was actually one of the best 10 players in the previously popular game of the world, the Otherworld Online. It seemed like these 2 first kills were not mere accidents. Perhaps Zero Arsenic couldn't help his mind that was running wild. To think that the repeated first kills were the achievements of this huntress. He took another glance at Yi Ci and remembered the words of Timely Rain. She was so familiar with that dungeon that it almost as if it was the backyard of her house. Her controls were really perfect too. I never knew the true definition of friggin' awesome until I tagged along with her to the dungeon. Yi Si turned her head to the side to look at Zero Arsenic, wondering what was wrong with this man and why did he keep giving her these bizarre stares. Right then, they arrived at the entrance of the private room. Zero Arsenic immediately showed Yi Si the way in. There was about 10 tables in the room with quite a lot of people seated around them. Zero Arsenic was doing introductions and it turned out that they were all the main members of the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear Guild. Their guild stronghold was also in the same city that Yi Si had stayed. The objective of this gathering was to discuss the matter of advancing into the chilly wetlands. However, to her surprise, Peacock Blue did not attend this gathering of the main members. This made Yi Si a little disappointed. She really wanted to see how *TCHY Peacock Blue looked like. As soon as Yi Si took a seat, someone immediately came up to give her a toast. Fortunately, it was stopped by Zero Arsenic. But she could still feel the excitement of these main members over yesterday's first kill and their great hopes on advancing the chilly wetlands. How do you feel about the first kills of these 2 dungeons? Were they difficult? They drank 3 rounds and were half done with their meals. Zero Arsenic, who was sitting beside Yi Si, suddenly questioned her with a smile. As long as everyone work well as a team, time will be the only issue in clearing a dungeon. Yi Si gave him a look as she evaded the crucial point of his question and gave him a vague response. After hearing her reply, Zero Arsenic didn't question her further. He only chuckled and engaged in a few idle chats with Yi Si. Then he pulled out a bank card and placed it in front of Yi Si. "Gomzia, there's $50,000 in here. It's your reward for getting the first kill on the cruel pit boss." Yi Si looked at that card. The corner of her mouth curled up into a cold smile. She was right all along. It seemed like after her 2 first kills, Zero Arsenic was a little curious about the previous first kills she had done anonymously and wanted to rope her in. A new guild like the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear would never match up to veteran guilds that had been established for over more than 10 years. They lacked elites, experience and skillful players. There was nothing but one thing that had allowed this kind of guild to sustain up to this scale: money. But then again, money was not a long-term solution. If they wanted to be powerful, they would inevitably need to pull a few experts into their guild. Without saying further, ever heard of the celebrity effects? The reason Yi Si had joined the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear Guild now was because she had let Thousand Sunsets down in the previous world. But this didn't mean that she planned to stay there for her entire life. After all, it was too exhausting to serve a guild attentively, and on top of that, she was someone who was used to soloing. Just being restrained in a guild was a great ordeal to her. But she was afraid that rejecting Zero Arsenic outright would not only make things difficult for her but also Zero Arsenic. After all, he was the vice guildmaster. And so Yi Si gave him a smile. "I like to hoard contribution points. Let's just stick to the 200 points of DP that Peacock Blue had promised me." Zero Arsenic was a little startled by her response, but it was very quickly concealed by his smile. When he saw Yi Si's firm gaze, he stopped insisting. Because he knew that once she had made up her mind, the outcome would not change, or worse, it would make things unhappy for both parties. So it was better to pull back at the right time and wait for the next opportunity. The gathering was celebrated with songs and dances on the surface, but ended with ulterior motives in each of their minds. Zero Arsenic invited Yi Si for a song, but she indirectly turned him down. She called for a cab by herself and returned home. She logged on to the game. After she did some daily missions, Yi Si immediately went into the auction. The few equipments dropped by the cruel pit boss yesterday that no one wanted had all been sold out. A profit of about 2,000 gold coins was made after deducting the auction fee. She sent out 400 gold coins to each of the other 4 people and then started searching for other auction items that piqued her interest. Suddenly, a pure iron arrow recipe came into her view. It was every hunter and ranger's wish to craft their own arrow because it would save them a big sum of money. But not everyone was lucky enough to get their hands on that damned beginner arrow crafting skill book. This pure iron arrow recipe had been put up on auction for almost 24 hours, but it didn't seem like it had attracted anyone's attention, or at least not much people could do arrow crafting. The recipe costed only 10 gold coins, so Yi Si immediately bought it and learnt it. The copper arrows she had been crafting no longer raised her proficiency level, so a higher level recipe was just what she needed. She didn't expect things to go so smoothly for her to be able to get her hands on a recipe today. Yi Si was enthusiastically crafted the arrow at one corner of the Red Lake City when she suddenly received a private message. Yi Si, are you there? No one other than Flutter and Sway would call her by that name. Or at least, for now. I'm here, what's wrong? Are you busy right now? I'm crafting arrows. I'll leave you alone then, Flutter and Sway said as she was about to close the private chat. Yi Si hurriedly stopped her. Just tell me if you have something to tell me. Flutter and Sway was a nice person, but she always placed everyone else before her. She'd put others' problems before hers even when she was struck by an emergency situation. If someone was a little busy, she didn't want to bother them. But then again, when would you be free of trouble in game? You'd even get into trouble when you were searching for a place to nap. Flutter and Sway hesitated for a moment before speaking. Our guild is fighting the Wild Boar King at Plains of Despair, but we kept getting wiped out. Can you come over to help? The Wild Boar King at Plains of Despair. Yi Si was just thinking of going to fight it too, but she didn't expect the World Conqueror to be so quick on their feet and had already beaten her to the punch. The Wild Boar King and the Sandstorm Scorpion were LVL 15 world boss. They had about the same amount of difficulty. However, 3 cities were scattered around the Plains of Despair, so it was frequently visited by many players and guilds, unlike the isolated desert where the Sandstorm Scorpion hid. It was unknown if anyone had ventured into there over half a month. That respawn point of the Wild Boar King had been a chaotic land of battles ever since the day Fate server opened. There was so much hesitation in Flutter and Sway's words. She was just worried that it wasn't that they couldn't handle the Wild Boar King, but they had instead met someone who was kill snatching. So they was hoping that she could snatch the final killing blow for them. In Fate, the right to loot a wild boss belonged to the player or the party who landed the final killing blow. Since she was friends with Flutter and Sway and she had requested, there was little reason for her to not go. Yi Si agreed without any reluctance. She asked them to manage for a little more while she'd arrive at most half an hour later. She then rode on her red pony and dashed towards the teleportation NPC. Fortunately, the teleportation master in Fate was very responsible. Very soon, Yi Si was sent to Scarlet Sand City, which was the closest to the Plains of Despair. She then immediately bolted towards the respawn point of the Wild Boar King without stopping, and not forgetting to ask, "Shu Shu, you didn't tell Qin Churuo that Gongxia is Yi Si right?" "Nope. If I did, he would be looking for you every single day to make you join the World Conqueror." Flutter and Sway knew Yi Si's personality well, so she naturally wouldn't tell. "But hurry, we are almost at our limits." After hearing that, Yi Si immediately ran even faster. Chapter 35, Killing the Wild Boar King. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Plains of Despair appeared to be lush green grassland, it did not even give off the air of despair. But as one traveled deeper into the plains, the grass grew more yellowed, and in the deepest parts of the plains, a desolate piece of land replaced the lush green scenery and crows flocked the sky. It indeed gave off an air of despair. Yi Si, however, was not here for the scenery. Her destination was the lair of the Wild Boar King. The Wild Boar King's lair was not hidden in the deepest part of the map. It was situated right beside a main road. This was the reason why the Wild Boar King wandering the Plains of Despair alone, or being a walking disaster for isolated pre.LVL 10 players. However, when most of the players had reached the level requirement, the glorious days of the boars were over as well. The guilds based in the nearby cities will always form parties to slay the Wild Boar King. But when too many people are out for a single boss, there will always be conflicts, which usually ended with a huge melee between several guilds. The Wild Boar King still roamed free, killing anybody it came across. This was why the Wild Boar King had not been slain even once. Yi Si did not even need to ask for the coordinates, all she had to do was to go in the general direction where people were headed, and she reached the melee. As expected, World Conqueror was part of the melee between several guilds. They were all famous guilds in her past life. Street Assistants Guild. The founders were rumored to be a group of players in their 50s. They had been playing games from a young age and they're all veterans, the best of the best. With the growth of their guild, they managed to attract quite a number of younger players to join their guild. They ranked number 9 in Z countries' Fate OL guilds. Blade of Darkness. Ranked 8 in Europe and America. They were a bunch of hot blooded Caucasian. They've been in international competitions for various games as well. Although Yi Si did not interact much with guilds from foreign countries, not to mention it was rare to see a foreign guild on Fate's eastern continent. And then there's the Z country's 12th ranked guild, World Conqueror. Other than the 3 big guilds, there were a lot of smaller ones lurking around, trying to sneak in and grab the first blood of the boss. Shoo, add me to your party. Yi Si immediately sent a message to Flutter and Sway. Almost immediately, Yi Si received a party invitation from Flawless Reflection. Yi Si joined the party immediately without hesitation. She could hear a jovial voice as soon as she entered the command channel, "Are you Gongziyu? I've never thought that you're a friend of Flutter and Sway." Everybody else was muted in the command channel, even text messages were limited to 1 every 30 seconds. That was why Yi Si asked directly with a text message, "Do I take care of the players or the boss? All you need to do is to secure the boss, leave the rest to us." Flawless Reflection's voice gave Yi Si a sense of familiarity. It was Qin Churuo. Although she had tried her best to lay low, the 2 first blood she obtained along with Timeless Rain and Pickled Pepper Phoenix Claws bragging, even when her name did not pop up in the forums, Gongziyu the Huntress went viral. Within a fortnight, many knew her name. That was the reason why Flawless Reflection immediately made Flutter and Sway fetch Gongziyu as soon as she mentioned that she was a friend of Gongziyu. The reason was none other than the 2 dungeon first bloods achieved by her. She must be good. As long as they could get the boss, nothing else mattered. Got it. Flawless Reflection continued after receiving a reply from Yi Si, "As long as we can get the boss, you can choose between 50,000 real word cash or the priority to choose any piece of equipment you want." Yi Si smiled at Flawless Reflection's words. He was just as she remembered, he never wanted to take advantage of others. This time, however, Yi Si wanted him to owe her one. Flawless Reflection was a man of honor. He'll always repay someone who did him favors. It was exactly this sort of behavior that got him betrayed in the end. Since he was loyal to any of his friends, Yi Si would not avoid things that are unavoidable. It would be better to be his friend, and then put his loyalty to good use. Yi Si replied after 30 seconds, "I'm only helping Flutter and Sway out, I don't need your gratitude." Flawless Moon did not expect Yi Si's words. Flutter and Sway was also touched by her actions. She messaged Yi Si in private, "Thanks a lot." Yi Si did not say much, she dashed towards the Wild Boar King. Empowered Hunter's Mark, Falcon Protection, Summoned OL3 and Snake Venom Needle were casted almost at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the Wild Boar King roared and charged towards Yi Si, brushing aside the MTs surrounding it. Even with the Wild Boar King's speed, there were just too many players around. It took the boss quite some time to reach Yi Si, and she kite the Wild Boar King with the other players acting as her barrier. Before Yi Si arrived on the scene, the Wild Boar King was already badly beaten up by players and it had lost almost 70% of its HP. Although locked in a vicious melee, the guilds retain their original goal of trying to get the boss. But at that moment, the wild boar king that they've been steadily building aggro on was snatched away by someone. The persons in charge of the guilds present became desperate. They immediately switched tactics. They abandoned relying on the MTs to build up the aggro, and instead ordered their ranged players to attack the wild boar king. However, it was not an easy task. First of all, Yi Si's movement speed was very fast. As she zipped left and right all around the place, the wild boar king did the same. Neither one of them was moving in a straight line. The mages with their slow channeling speeds cried. Just as their spells were done channeling, the wild boar king was already out of their range. Secondly, the wild boar king would sometimes accumulate energy with its hind legs and then leap towards Yi Si. But Yi Si had very high balance and perception stats. She jumped away from the wild boar king's attack before it could land. This, however, was a case of misfortune for the players trying to chase after the wild boar king. If they kept their distance, they could never get close enough, but if they followed closely, they'd be kicked to death by the wild boar king. And the third factor that caused their desperation was because of the players the other guilds. Despite having the common goal of killing the wild boar king, the players from different guilds were fighting among themselves. They needed to chase after a raging boar in the midst of so many players engaged in combat, whilst having the need to constantly cast spells while on the move. It was a near-impossible feat. Flawless Reflection stood on a tree in the Plains of Despair. At the height that he was at, he could clearly see Yi Si in action. Although he appeared calm, he was actually deeply awed. He'd always thought that he's one of the experts, and it was the truth. But compared to Gong Ziyu, Flawless Reflection felt that he still had much to learn. Even without factoring in the skills owned by her that he did not even possess, to jump around with her high balance and to flawlessly achieve a continuous combo with her skills, it was not something the average player could do. From the perspective of players from different classes, Gong Ziyu's movements were elegant, but only hunter-classed players would be able to truly understand the true mechanical skills required behind those elegant movements. To be honest with himself, even if Flawless Moon could leap around with his balance, to be as masterful as Gong Ziyu was still far from possible. Gong Ziyu, just who the hell are you? If Flawless Moon asked for Gong Ziyu's help through flutter and sway, he saw her merely as an extra pair of helping hands, and did not recognize her strength. His views of Gong Ziyu had entirely changed. Gong Ziyu was not just an average Joe, it would be best if she could be part of his guild. The wild boar king is nearly dead, everybody hurry up. Someone randomly shouted, and the players maddeningly hastened their chase. Spells after spells landed on the enraged wild boar king. Yi Si chugged down a bottle of rage potion, turned around in midair, and casted rapid fire. Copper arrows coated with poison from the venomous scorpion gauntlet landed right between the wild boar king's eyes. That was its weakness. Attacking that spot will have a 100% chance of triggering a critical hit and armor penetration. However, due to the wild boar king's massive size, it was impossible to hit that spot unless one did a backwards jump like Yi Si. Critical hit. Armor penetration .3281. The wild boar king let out a roar, and its body that was as big as a small hill crashed down with a boom, kicking up dust. System messages began to flood the world channel. Congratulations, World Conqueror Guild, to be the first to slay the LVL-15 Wild Boss Wild Boar King. Rewards. Guild Prestige 300, Red Sand City Prestige 1000, Gold X 100. Let us remember their names. Congratulations, Flawless Reflection, for slaying the Wild Boar King. Rewards. Red Sand City Prestige X 100, Talent Points X2. Congratulations, Flutter and Sway, for slaying the Wild Boar King. Rewards. Red Sand City Prestige X 100, Talent Points X2. Congratulations, Gong Ziyu, for slaying the Wild Boar King. Rewards. Red Sand City Prestige X 100, Talent Points X2. Yi Si was glad to earn more talent points. She said goodbye to Flutter and Sway and immediately left the area. She rushed towards the Red Sand City frantically. If she stayed, she would have been surrounded and annihilated by the other guilds. The entire World Conqueror Guild erupted into cheers. The cheers of World Conqueror Guild could be heard throughout the entire Plains of Despair. They carried Flawless Reflection down from the tree and threw him into the air repeatedly. Flawless Reflection himself was delighted. But what got his attention was the golden words that appeared right after the announcement, Gong Ziyu left has the party. He did not ask for anything, nor did he say his goodbye. He left the party right after slaying the boss. A strange feeling gripped Flawless Reflection's heart. It was not his style to owe somebody. But he could not do anything for the time being, and could only plan to contact Gong Ziyu after the celebration was over. Chapter 36 What is a player? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. From the day the forum was invented, it became the place where gossip and news originated. Wasn't there a saying? Forums were like the people's square. No matter what it was, everyone would know so long as you hung it up. The second night after the brutal dungeon was cleared, 3B videos had been edited and posted up on the forum as usual. These video recordings had always been a timely help. Of course, he was still very wise to post it in the Technology Exchange forum and not in the Busy Gossip forum. Even on these kind of forums, however, the page views were already climbing to 7 million on the second day. There were only two reasons. Reason number one, he never played with a guild and therefore had never learned from others' experiences within a team. Reason number two, the elf huntress inside was literally like a bug. She had excellent controls and her positions were accurate. Suddenly, she became a target of examination and study for many hunters. There were even some players who liked to mind other people's businesses and screenshotted all of Gong Ziyu's controls. They made a section which provided explanations on how to improve a hunter's skills. This post suddenly became the most popular in the hunter's career forum. For the hunters who seemed unable to play any further, it looked like they all found a new learning target and a direction to develop their skills upon seeing this post. The following days would be a little different. To be exact, Yi Si's days in the association would be a little bit different. As the guild channel will notify when a member goes online, many people greeted Yi Si as soon as she came online. She wasn't aware of when this had started, but numerous people greeted her every day. It made Yi Si, who was naturally aloof and lonely, weary of dealing with this situation. At most times she just replied, "Hello everyone." Not only that, Peacock Blue was abnormally quiet, even though she still managed the big and small matters in the guild, she left Yi Si alone. The matter of her asking for equipment wasn't even mentioned and her attempt of kicking Yi Si out of the guild hadn't been mentioned. It seemed as if the rage from that day on the guild channel had never existed. Although she didn't know the reason, Yi Si was nevertheless happy by the quietness. Every day, she just rubbed the arrow, picked herbs, and practiced life skills. 2 or 3 days passed in a flash. Yi Si was currently rubbing the arrow, having just reached the most important stage. She only needed 1% more to receive the intermediate level of arrow crafting, so Yi Si held in a vigorous effort to finish it in 1 hour. Coincidentally, her private messages started ringing at this time. After a look, it turned out to be Jiangnan. "Miss Gong Ziyu, if you don't mind me asking, do you have time tomorrow?" These few days, Wang Jiangnan was online every day to wait for Yi Si's call, but he hasn't even seen a shadow. Every day, he looked up to his boss who always kept a straight face and seemed like he was punishing him for lying. It made him very irritated. Due to the bug repair matter, Wang Jiangnan paid especially close attention to Yi Si, therefore he knew that Gong Ziyu recently suicided in the brutal dungeon and helped someone else kill the Wild Boar King. She had probably already forgotten about his matter, so he felt that he really shouldn't carry on waiting for her message. He could only contact her voluntarily. Yi Si was rubbing the arrow when she heard Wang Jiangnan asking very carefully, She couldn't control her laughter. This lead designer, one who would control the future destiny and attain a worldwide reputation, always has a high and vigorous spirit with a condescending attitude. When did he ever talk to someone in a distressed attitude? You will know the day after tomorrow of what happens tomorrow. Wang Jiangnan was so embarrassed. How is he meant to answer after this sentence? Then when can we kill the sandstorm scorpion again? Yi Xi didn't want to be too harsh on this future lead designer. If she offended him now, what if he held a grudge in the future? In the end, her arms were still no match for the thigh. After rubbing a few more arrows, Yi Xi snorted. I am rubbing arrows now. At the very longest, I would take half an hour to upgrade to intermediate level of archery craftsmanship. How about I go after that? Then I will go first to contact the development team. There are also people observing from the sidelines. Yes, it needs to be judged. This time it was Yi Xi's turn to be confused. Why did she feel so strange? She felt as if she was going to participate in a talent show and perform a talent in front of the judges. This fact proves that her feeling was completely correct. When Yi Xi rode on her little red horse to the sandstorm scorpion's new location, she could see from a distance the level 1 subsidiary characters from 5 or 6 different races, just standing there. Her eyesight was very good, so she could see a human cleric Smurf from far away. He waved at her. Yi Xi waved back and dismounted, but she didn't walk towards where the crowd of people were gathered. Instead, she walked in the opposite direction to where the sandstorm scorpion was hidden. She believed that the sandstorm scorpion should have respawned after so many days. Even if it hadn't respawned, the crowd of developers gathered there would already have made it respawn. The soft but burning hot sand covered Yi Xi's steps. It seemed that with every step she took, it sunk into the ground. Her footsteps were slowing down, slower and slower. Then, she suddenly faced back and sprang away. The Falcon's Protection, Empowered Hunter's Mark, Snake Venom Needle, and the OL-3's Taunt were casted simultaneously. Before she landed on the ground, the sandstorm scorpion was still underground and its head had already trailed with big red words that showed the damage. 1729. A few evaluating developers stared at Yi Xi with mouth agape. They had seen a lot of people with good mechanical skills, but there were not many as swift and as ferocious. The number of such players could be counted with the fingers of both hands. After this, there was something that happened which surprised the designers even more. That sandstorm scorpion was like a chicken trying to find its chicks just after opening its eyes. It was following behind Yi Xi without missing one step. In less than 15 minutes, it got pushed by Yi Xi to the edge of a pile of dead cottonwood trees. In a flash, the sandstorm scorpion got stuck in the cottonwood forest without being able to move. After that, the huntress didn't show any more of her skills. She just stood somewhere near the cottonwood forest to shoot using the stationary, no-brainer shooting style. That ferocious sandstorm scorpion, stuck there like a gigantic bullseye, began hissing. It wasn't able to move, not to mention getting out of combat. Following this procedure, it would be shot dead in no time. There was no point to carry on watching from here. A few designers sighed because they had to admire the player's ability to discover something. They thought that they tested the game hundreds of times and repaired numerous bugs. However, there were still many bugs from the player's perspective. Miss Gongziyu, we are very thankful for you to spend your precious time with us, doing this important evaluation. We will repair this bug. There was a leader among the designers who walked in the front. This was a gnome. Yi Xi had to look down when talking to him, which made her neck very uncomfortable. Anything dropped by it belongs to me. Yi Xi mentioned it again. Some things have to said face to face. Otherwise, who knew how these fellows would change the condition? Including the carcass. The few developers looked at each other, the gnome that was their leader nodded his head. Of course. This was what we agreed on in the beginning. You won't go back to change the drop rate now, right? Yi Si squinted her eyes and looked at a few people with mistrust. A few developers acted as if Yi Si read their minds, and they repeatedly waved their hands. No, no. You gave us such a good tip-off, we wouldn't do these kinds of things. They didn't wait for Yi Si to speak. Instead, they turned around and told Wang Jiangnan to accompany Yi Si until she finished tidying up the carcass before going back. They just disappeared without a trace into flashes of white light. Wang Jiangnan could actually just help Yi Si finish up the sandstorm scorpion in one action, but he didn't know why he didn't want to do it. He sat down on a piece of rock nearby and quietly looked at Yi Si using her skill non-stop. Neither person said anything. It felt like the whole world's time just solidified like that. Who knew how much time had passed before Wang Jiangnan suddenly turned his gaze from Sandstorm Scorpion to Yi Si. He asked, Gongziyu, is this game fun? Yi Si was slightly taken aback. She turned her face to look at Wang Jiangnan a little puzzled. Wasn't this game designed by your team? Why would you ask me? It was designed by us and we think it's fun because we see a lot of people coming to play, so we thought it should be fun. Then why do you still ask me? Don't know. I just wanted to ask a normal player what this game actually feels like. Wang Jiangnan sighed and gazed at the distant desert. His gaze was a little confused. I suddenly don't have much confidence. I don't know if people actually like the things we create. Yi Si quietly stared at Wang Jiangnan. She couldn't tell how old he was from that randomly generated human character. From Yi Si's memory, however, Wang Jiangnan should only be 20 years old now, the youngest designer on the designing team. Although he was known as genius by the historians, geniuses probably had their own confusion and distress. If you don't know what it's like because you're the one designing it, then go experience it as a player. Yi Si lightly said as she turned her head around and looked at the sandstorm scorpion with only 10% of blood left. I already tested this game. No matter how many times you test it, be it 100 or 1,000 times, you will always be one of the developers. You have the highest ranked weapon, or the coolest equipment, cut bosses down like you would vegetables. Even one person can just solo the Lord God. This is not called a player, this is called an evaluation machine. Yi Si immediately interrupted Wang Jiangnan. A so-called player means that from the start of the game, they are full of anticipation for it and they take every option seriously. For example, things like whether the eyebrows look good or whether the name sounds nice. Players think about how to earn more coins and how to level up faster, they laugh around with friends and fight with opponents for revenge. Players fight over each other for a single equipment and battle between millions of people. This is a player. The game is their life. When Yi Si spoke up to this point, she turned to look at Wang Jiangnan with a smile. The lovely customer service number 094, do you still need to ask me this simple question? Chapter 37 Fruit Jelly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sunset. The sandy plains were coated a shade of amber red by the setting sun. The scene itself was beautiful. Wang Jiangnan stood in this beautiful scenery, staring at Yi Si as if she was an alien. He was known as a genius even when he was young. It was said that geniuses are lonely. Wang Jiangnan felt just that. He was always left out from his school days until work, so this was the first time someone talked to him like that. It was a strange feeling. He suddenly laughed along with Yi Si. Wouldn't it be cheating for me to play the game? I know everything about the game. Yi Si rolled her eyes, and what good can it do you? You think the players are playing with those privileged accounts of yours? Getting any items you want just by knowing where they would drop. She felt as if there was a gap between them. She waved her hand impatiently, whatever, you don't have the time to play the game anyways, why bother asking so much? I'll kill this sandstorm scorpion, you guys record it, and we're done. Wang Jiangnan was not angry. He grinned at Yi Si. you don't seem to like me. I hate game developers. Why? There are two things you guys will do. 1. Punish the players exploiting the bug and then fix the bug. And 2. Use the players to fix the bug. How do you expect me to feel good about you guys? Yi Si was a gaming veteran, how could she not understand how the game companies work? Players are like sheep, and the fur comes from the sheep. Wang Jiangnan was stunned for a moment before letting out a hearty laugh. This was the first time he had heard a player's comments about game developers. It was very accurate. He laid on the sand, squinting at the red sky, not betraying a hint of his thoughts. Yi Si paid him no heed. A game developer was not somebody she could afford to offend, and she would not offend them even if she could afford to. The final arrow hit its mark, and the sandstorm scorpion went limp. It turned into a huge amount of experience points and surged into Yi Si's experience gauge. Her level instantly rose to LVL 16 with 20% experience. Although she was still 2 levels below the let go of that girl who was ranked first in the level rankings, it was good enough. After throwing a few chunks of meat to OL3 that was acting cute, Yi Si happily went to loot the carcass. Give me a chance, let me complete the venomous scorpion set in one go. Yi Si made a cross gesture with her hand and prayed to God with all sincerity. She then extended her black hand, towards the sandstorm scorpion. Apparently, God felt no obligation to fulfill Yi Si's wishes and ignored her prayer. She was once again shrouded by her black hand aura. The sandstorm scorpion only yielded 2 equipment, 2 skill books, a bunch of potions and several hundred gold coins. Venomous Scorpion Greaves X1, Venomous Scorpion Cape X1, Decoy X1, Resurrection X1. Although she could not complete the equipment set, the 2 equipment she received were not something that she already had. This at least made Yi Si feel somewhat better. Especially with the +7 speed of the Venomous Scorpion Greaves as well as the additional active skill called Dash. Dash is 25 to the front, cooldown 1 minute. It was a life-saving skill, especially when it comes to PvP and kiting. Yi Si immediately activated her Brooch of Deceit and adjusted her level so that she could equip the 2 equipment. She was still feeling a bit of regret for not being able to obtain a complete set of the Venomous Scorpion item set and unlock its secret attribute. She immediately let go of that thought. A LVL 20 purple equipment set would only last her up to when her character reached LVL 35. After equipping the greaves and the cape, Yi Si's GS immediately hit 627. She had 200 or so more points than the ranked 1 player on the equipment rating ranking. Decoy was also one of the godlike skills of the hunter class. It could move the aggro of its caster to a specific target. This was a must-have skill when it came to exploring dungeons and kiting wild bosses. Resurrection was a skill for clerics and priests. It was a skill usually found in LVL 35 dungeons. It was a must-have skill for clerics and priests. Although it could be learned by a LVL 12 character, it was only dropped in LVL 35 dungeons. It was a very rare drop. Yi Si believed that not a single person in the game had this skill book already. She couldn't even imagine the chaos that would erupt if she sold it in the auction house. Yi Si never expected the skill book to drop from the sandstorm scorpion. Her luck was not that bad after all. However, Yi Si had no thoughts of selling the skill book. The main reason was that the game and real-life currency exchange system was not yet available, she would not be able to sell the skill book at a good price. That was why Yi Si decided to hold on to that skill book temporarily. After equipping the necessary equipment, learning some necessary skills and sorting out the loot, Yi Si climbed onto the sandstorm scorpion's carcass and dissected it. Wang Jiangnan had also finished his report. He walked towards the sandstorm scorpion, looked up at Yi Si and smiled, "Gongziyu, we'll meet again." Yi Si simply laughed, "I, for one, hope that we'll never meet again." Wang Jiangnan did not respond, he waved his hand at Yi Si, "Goodbye." Yi Si waved back, and continued dissecting the sandstorm scorpion carcass. Yi Si was done after half an hour. She summoned her steed and galloped back to Sunset City. Yi Si saw a cleric in grey robe fighting against a bear. The cleric's movement was adept, and she was able to masterfully use her skills. She did not waste even one bit of CD time, and managed to follow up her attacks with skills after skills. She defeated a LVL 13 monster with only 4 skills. That cleric could deal some serious damage. Although she only stood still, but with some training, she could become an excellent cleric. Yi Si silently praised the cleric as she rode past her. She noticed the cleric's info the moment they brushed past each other. The cleric did not hide her information. ID, Fruit Jelly Race. Elf Class. Cleric Level. 12 Fruit Jelly. Yi Si hesitated for a moment. The name was familiar. Yi Si finally remembered the name after traveling for quite some distance. Isn't that one of the top 10 offensive clerics, Fruit Jelly? If Yi Si could be counted as someone who loved to PK, but Fruit Jelly was even more fanatical when it came to piking. When the arena opened during the later stages of the game, she spent 10 months in the arena, earning enough kill glory to redeem the first complete General. Class equipment set in Fate. But to say that she was famous only because of her PK tendencies was unfair. Her mana conservation was one of the best. She once took care of a 25-man squadron, and none of them died. However, she had a flaw. She would ensure that her target's survival, but there was no guarantee that the target that was healed would walk away with full health. She was later known as the Undying Fruit because of that. Of course, it was something that would happen only in the future. Fruit Jelly was still a cleric who had spent her stats points wrongly. Fruit Jelly was an honest person with a good character. As a girl, she never hid her feelings, and she was loyal to her friends and a straightforward person. Yi Si suddenly stopped, and a thought slowly formed in her head. What if she had an offensive cleric like Fruit Jelly in her team someday? Her own team. That thought grew in her head like grass in the spring. Despite not having a clear plan, Yi Si turned back and headed towards the direction of Fruit Jelly. Fruit Jelly was still fighting against monsters one at a time. Fate was the first game she had ever played. She was a real beginner, and she had distributed her stats incorrectly. Thoughts of deleting her account and starting from scratch had surfaced, but she could not bring herself to let go of her LVL 12 character. "Hey, cleric," a voice suddenly rang out. Fruit Jelly turned around and saw an elf riding on a red horse besides her. The elf who was smiling at her had fair skin, and her amber eyes glittered gems. A panther followed her close by, also eyeing her with amber-colored eyes. "Greetings, Huntress." Yi Si grinned at Fruit Jelly, while the latter replied after carefully examining her in OL3, "Anything I can help you with?" Yi Si immediately started a trade with her, and included the Resurrection Skill Book. "Do you want to have this?" As expected, Fruit Jelly's eyes brightened up right away. She believed that the Huntress knew the worth of that book. "How many coins do you want for it?" Fruit Jelly stared at the Resurrection Skill Book, and then raised her head and looked at Yi Si. Her eyes were filled with caution, and a hint of glee. 10,000 gold coins. Yi Si gave her a random price. Fruit Jelly was momentarily stunned, and her facial expression changed slightly. She eyed the skill book again and reluctantly ended the trade. "Sorry, I do not have that amount of money." "Are you not going to consider it?" Yi Si's eyes formed into slits, her smile not betraying any of her true intentions. Fruit Jelly turned her head around and joked dejectedly, "Do you accept a 10 years installment?" It was Yi Si's time to be stunned. She did not know that Fruit Jelly had a sense of humor. She laughed and then shook her head, "Of course not, I'm not the bank." "Then there's nothing to consider." Fruit Jelly turned around. It was obvious that she wanted that skill book very much. Chapter 38, A Rigged Quest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. YCI issued out another trade. She selected the Resurrection Skill book on top and then pressed down to confirm deal. Fruit Jelly turned around a little angrily. I said I don't have the money. It's for you. YCI said quietly as she gazed at Fruit Jelly's slightly angry face. Fruit Jelly froze there immediately without finishing her words. She stared wide-eyed at the huntress in front of her and then picked her ears. She laughed in disbelief. Did I hear you wrongly? No, I said I will give you this book as a gift. YCI smiled. Why? Fruit Jelly was surprised to the extent that she couldn't speak. This is the Resurrection Skill book, its value is. I know, I check the auction house every day. I know better than you. YCI stopped Fruit Jelly's words by mentioning it casually. Then why would you give it to me? Why? YCI lifted her head and thought about it for a while. She obviously couldn't tell her that she would become a famous cleric with top-notch controls and mana conservation in the future, so she wanted to befriend her. I find you pleasing to my eyes. I feel like you are the type I can interact deeply with. YCI said after thinking for a while. This answer made Fruit Jelly's forehead crease. She was given the Resurrection Skill book just because she looked pleasing to YCI's eyes. Just because YCI thought that she could interact deeply with her. Is there something wrong with this person or do they just have too much money? Although it was suspicious, Fruit Jelly had to say that she admired YCI's personality. She hesitated for a while. I might delete my account. Then just assume that this book will go to waste. YCI looked like she didn't care at all. She didn't believe that Fruit Jelly will delete her account after learning the Resurrection Skill book. I don't have anything to trade with it, nor do I have money. I said before, I find you pleasing to my eyes. I want to befriend with you. YCI repeated. Fruit Jelly looked towards the book and hesitated for a while. At last, she bit her lips and agreed to the deal. Then she immediately sent out a friend's request to YCI. YCI accepted the request and added her. Fruit Jelly stared blankly at YCI's name. You are Gongzi. YCI scratched her head. She didn't think that they had interacted before, so why did she have a strange "oh, so it's you" face? Yes, I am, so said YCI. Fruit Jelly seemingly dropped all her previous precautions and enthusiastically looked at YCI's eyes. Your controls are so impressive. I go to the forums every day to see your explanatory post. Even though I am a cleric, I still learnt a lot of things. What post? YCI was confused. She was busy crafting arrows lately and the practice life skills were never posted on the forum. What is she talking about? Fruit Jelly was a very talkative person once she got close to someone. She chatted with YCI for a while. Fruit Jelly trusted YCI more than before and was also more grateful. Gongzi. Even though I'm not very good at playing games, but just call me if you have anything that needs my help in the future. This was obviously what YCI wanted the most. They said a few words to each other before parting to do their own things. Although the Resurrection Skill book was given away, resulting less income but making friends with Fruit Jelly, the future top-ranked cleric, was worth it. YCI rushed to the auction house immediately after she finished her daily routine from Sunset City to Red Lake City. She already learnt the Flaming Arrow crafting book, but she still hasn't gathered all the materials yet, so she was still a bit worried. After she cleared the Cruel Pit, she could move on to the Chilly Wetlands where all the bosses had ice attribute. Fire-based skills and weapons with burn effects could deal a lot of damage to them. With her Flaming Arrow, her DPS would be increased by a lot in the Chilly Wetlands dungeons. It's such a pity that in the auction house, the fire crystal shards that were necessary to craft the flaming arrows were very few in number. The sparse quantity available were already all bought by YCI. However, she still did not have enough of them. Just as she was mulling over this problem, her private message channel rang. Clear Moon's excited voice traveled through. Sister. My mining and forging skills have reached 50% of the beginner level. Yi Si was surprised. No way, 50% of the beginner level. It was very hard to level up the life skills in Fate. These skills were divided into 7 levels. Apprentice, Beginner, Medium Tier, Advanced Tier, Expert, Master and Grandmaster. To progress to the beginner tier from the apprentice tier, a player needed to either gather ores non-stop or repeatedly practice a particular skill. The advancement from beginner to advanced required a huge amount of time and gold coins or experience points. Moreover, for a player to progress from advanced to grandmaster, they're required to spend tremendous amount of time, money and experience. Additionally, they had to complete a randomly generated high difficulty quest. Clear Moon was not very wealthy. The fact that he was able to have reached 50% of the beginner level meant that he spent a great portion of his experience points on his forging and mining. What's your level now? LVL 11. Clear Moon replied with a grin. It was as she expected. Rangers were usually very fast when it came to leveling up solo. With Yi Si's guidance, Clear Moon would have been at least LVL 13 or LVL 14. However, since he was still at LVL 11, it was proof that he had spent all his experience points leveling up his life skills. With your level, it must be dangerous to go out mining. Yi Si let out a sigh. It's okay, sister, I've mastered the art of escaping. Don't worry, I don't like leveling up, it's boring. I'm more interested in mining and forging. Clear Moon obviously did not even care about his level and experience points. Fate was all about creating one's own fate. Some players wanted to earn lots of money, some prefer to level up, while there are others who love to learn life skills. Apparently Clear Moon had chosen to learn life skills. Yi Si could only encourage him so that he would not give up. After a brief talk, Clear Moon mentioned that he was mining at the edge of Scorching Plains. Scorching Plains was the LVL 15 to LVL 20 leveling area. The place was rich with ores, and fire crystal shards were a unique product of Scorching Plains. Do you have many fire crystal shards? I have so many of them that I can't even fit them all into my storage anymore. These things are a must when it comes to crafting weapons that deal burn damage. Sadly, I do not have the blueprints to craft such weapons. I originally intended to just stockpile some of them. But now I have so many that I have half a mind to sell them to the NPCs. Clear Moon's eyebrows creased after he mentioned his fire crystal shards. He appeared to be distressed. Yi Si was overjoyed, and she immediately said, "Don't sell them to the NPC. Sell them to me instead. I'll pay you 50 gold coins per a stack. Give me 20 stacks. Take them if you want, sister. You don't have to pay me. You need the money for forging things. Don't act generous. I will need a lot of them in the future." Yi Si declined Clear Moon's offer, and immediately sent 1,000 gold to Clear Moon. Within moments, a mail had arrived from Clear Moon. It contained the fire crystal shards. He even sent 10 extra stacks of them, and wouldn't accept money for them from Yi Si no matter what she said. With the necessary materials acquired, Yi Si began to focus on crafting the flaming arrows. After crafting around 10 stacks of them, Yi Si received another private message. It was from Ideal Height 1. 7M. Despite having only partied once, they remained in contact, and were friends who shared a healthy relationship with each other. "Gongzi, are you free? Can you help me?" Ideal Height 1.7M was frank as ever. "What is it?" Yi Si was also straightforward. "I have a quest that can only be completed with 3 people. It is to retrieve an item. You're the one who's the most suitable for this job. Please help." "What quest is that?" Ideal Height 1.7M immediately sent Yi Si the quest details. It was a quest to retrieve an item from a mountain. This was a quest every mage class players had to do. The mission was to retrieve a package from a pine tree at the cliff at Thousand Sect Mountain. This quest tested not only balance, but also the reaction speed of a player. Players who accepted the quest must retrieve a package from the tree that was at a crumbling cliff. A slightly loss of balance would cause the player to fall into the bottomless cliff. Even if the package was successfully retrieved, a LVL-15 elite python would appear from the hollowed-out tree to snatch the package away. If the player could not attract the aggro of the python and reacquire the package, the quest would be reset and could only be initiated the next day. If the quest was done of a flat land, it was not hard. But to do it on a cliff with a slanted tree was an entirely different matter. Yi Xi spent an entire week in her past life to pass this mission. Ideal Height 1.7M seemed to be having troubles with the quest as well. Yi Xi did not decline her request and instead accepted it straight away. She crafted a few more sets of flaming arrow, sorted out some of her equipment, and headed out to the 1000 Sek mountain outside of Nodding City. Teleportation was nifty. Yi Xi arrived at 1000 Sek's mountain within half an hour. Ideal Height 1.7M and Let Go of That Girl were talking at the foot of the mountain. After they spotted Yi Xi, they immediately greeted her. The three of them then summoned their mounts and raced towards the top of the mountain. Yi Xi had a sense of reminiscence as she stood at that exact spot. It was as if she was still a mage, and her past as a mage flashed through her mind. She smiled and looked at Ideal Height 1.7M and Let Go of That Girl. Wait here, I'll go get it. Please be careful, I've died for more than 10 times already. Ideal Height 1.7M creased her eyebrows. To make us mages complete this quest that requires high balance, isn't it rigged? Let Go of That Girl said, when the snake appears, jump back as fast as you can, I will cast taunt on it. Don't fall down. Yi Xi showed the duo an OK sign, and jumped gracefully onto the slanted tree. She extended her arms towards the package. But, at that moment. Chapter 39 This has nothing to do with me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A black python as thick as a lamppost slithered out of the hollowed bark, extending its red tongue. It crashed into Yi Xi, and held the package in its mouth. When Ideal Height 1.7M saw the python she shouted, Gongzi, watch out, and she cast a frost arrow, hoping to draw the aggro of the python. Let Go of That Girl panicked. He was a melee-classed player, and could not perform any ranged attacks. What the hell? It's not supposed to come out so early. Who's the one who designed this quest? It's rigged. The python had appeared early, which was why the group was caught off guard. Fortunately, Yi Xi was someone who was a mage in her past life, and she just happened to be a huntress in her current life. She knew that the time which the python will appear was flexible, and her balance was high. She leaped into the air, intending to grab hold of the package. According to Yi Xi's calculation, as long as she could land on either the snake or the dead tree, she could bounce back onto the cliff with a little force. However, reality would not always unfold as one would expect. In a flash, the python coiled itself around Yi Xi and she fell downwards. Even with her past life experiences as a sorceress, this sudden change managed to surprise Yi Xi. Reflexively, she tried to break free, but the python's coil tightened around Yi Xi. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Ideal Height 1.7M was so startled that she shouted out in a shrill voice, Gongzi. Be careful. Let Go of That Girl leaned forward, trying to grab hold of Yi Xi. Gongzi, give me your hand. Grab onto me. The frost arrow cast by Ideal Height 1.7M landed on the python precisely at that moment. The python opened its mouth and roared with anger. The package in its mouth fell out, and Yi Xi caught it. She then threw the package up the cliff. The python breathed poison at the two trying to help Yi Xi, and fell down the cliff with Yi Xi in its embrace. The bottom of the cliff was like a deep abyss. If one fell down, that would be the end of them. There would be no chance for survival. Losing experience points while helping somebody out with their quest. What a joke. Yi Xi was determined to not let this happen. She drew out her venomous scorpion stinger and stabbed at the python. With slippery scales covering the entire length of its body, Yi Si's stab only dealt a little more than 100 damage, which was nothing to the python that had 200,000 HP. Fortunately, the venomous scorpion stinger's passive managed to prop the python turned into a shade of green after being poisoned, causing it to struggle in pain. The python's struggle caused its body to tense up, further constricting Yi Si and forcing the air out of her lungs. Yi Si could feel her head spinning and darkness began to creep into her vision. She was completely at the python's mercy. Even with her godlike skills, she could do nothing in this situation. Before her world was completely enveloped by darkness, Yi Si thought helplessly. What an embarrassing first death ever since her rebirth. Ideal height 1.7 m and let go of that girl could only watch with eyes wide as Yi Si fell down the cliff, along with the python that had coiled around her. Ideal height 1.7 m was especially panicked, she was still holding the quest item that Yi Si had thrown upwards. Gongzi, she shouted. Let go of that girl, grabbed hold of her, let's go down there. Before the duo could descend from the mountain, a party notification chimed in. Your party member, Gongzi Yu, was kicked out from the party by the system. Kicked out of the party by the system. What the hell had happened? The duo was immediately shrouded with astonishment and uneasiness. Without hesitation, they immediately tried to send private messages to Yi Si, but they would only receive a system notification. The user that you're trying to contact could not be reached at the moment. Even the messenger pigeon that could reach anywhere could not get in contact with Yi Si. What the hell happened? Drip. Drip. Chilly water droplets fell onto Yi Si's forehead as she slowly regained conscious. She quivered and sat up abruptly. Before she could get her bearings straight, she felt something wet on her back. She almost jumped as she looked back. She was lying on top of the python. The wet feeling was actually the mucus from the snake's body. Yi Si would not be able to fight back if a LVL-15 wild boss chose to strike at such a close range. She would definitely die there and then. However, the python unexpectedly chose not to attack. It stared unmoving at Yi Si with cold and malicious eyes. Yi Si had always disliked snakes. Her skin would be covered with goosebumps whenever she sees one, not to mention one at such a close distance. Despite her dislike of snakes, Yi Si discovered that something was off with the python. She stood up, and slowly backed off. The python, however, merely flicked its tongue at Yi Si. She then took a look at its status. She couldn't resist the urge to purse her lips. The python was heavily wounded, having only a sliver of HP left. If she could strike at this time, she would be able to defeat it. Yi Si let out a whistle, and OL-3 appear. It stretched itself out lazily, and then bared its fangs at the python, showing its dominance. The python's gaze grew even icier, but it could not move its body. It struggled and breathed out poison at Yi Si. Yi Si was instantly covered by a green mist, and her HP began to drop rapidly. She could only drink 2 bottles of potions to recover, and after healing OL-3 as well, she set it loose upon the python. Empowered Hunter's Mark, Decoy, Venomous Snake Needle, Rapid Fire. The python did not possess a high level of intelligence. Its attention was immediately drawn to OL-3 by the use of Decoy. Despite reacting, the python's immobilized body meant that it was only a paper tiger. It might be the simplest battle that Yi Si had ever experienced since she started the game. In 3 minutes, the python disappeared into a huge quantity of experience points and flowed into Yi Si's and OL-3's experience gauge. Experience points provided by a wild elite boss such as this was a lot. Yi Si's experience points was immediately filled up to 78% of LVL-16. It was a shame that the python was only a quest monster. It did not drop any loot, save for some gold coins and potions. It was still better than nothing. Yi Si began to dissect the python's carcass after she stored all the items into her inventory. The python's entire length was covered with wounds. There were huge patches where its scales had dropped off and blood poured out from its wounds. Yi Si was curious. What happened to the snake? Yi Si only found out the truth when she saw its bones. Every single joint of its bones was dislocated. Yi Si looked up, she could not even see the top of the mountain. It seemed that they fell right from the top. Yi Si surveyed her surrounding while dissecting the carcass. It was a haven. Tall trees were everywhere and the ground was covered by lush grass. The impact of their fall snapped quite a few trees, messing up part of the scenery. Yi Si, who was coiled tightly in the python's embrace, had survived the fall. The python was the one that took the damage from the impact, while Yi Si was able to walk away with her life. Snake meat, snakeskin, scales, bones, snake gall, venom sac, and 108 glossy snake ribs. These were all the spoils from Yi Si's battle with the python. She wrinkled her nose. The blood covering her body made her uncomfortable. She jumped into a clear pond not far away to wash away the blood. She suddenly felt a sharp pain on her right hand. She was shocked. Was she bitten by something? She had no antidotes left. She came out of the water and noticed that the source of the pain was a small fishhook. A fishhook. A fishhook. What was a fishhook doing at a place like that? Yi Si pulled the fish hook out of her hand, and traced it to the source using the fishing line. Her face began to twitch. At the other end of the line was a fishing rod, held by a hand, and the hand was crushed underneath one of the trees that had snapped in half. Yi Si realized that she seemed to have done something that she shouldn't have. She climbed back up to shore and pushed aside the broken trunk with all her might. A blond man lay underneath the tree, he was already dead. Yi Si looked at him, puzzled. There were a few words below his name. Johnny's corpse, Grandmaster Fisherman, tears streamed down Yi Si's cheeks. She swore that it had nothing to do with her. The person must have been murder. The corpse must have been left behind because of a quest. That must be it. She would never admit that she accidentally killed a Grandmaster Fisherman when she fell down with the python. After calming herself, Yi Si looked at the dead Grandmaster Fisherman and began to consider doing some funeral arrangements. How kind was she? She even thought of burying him. Where could one find such a kind player? Chapter 40 Under Attack. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Grandmaster Fisherman was not a normal NPC. He was entirely different from the NPCs who could be found in the game and were programmed with just 1 or 2 lines of nonsense. If Yi Si recalled correctly, Instructor NPCs were usually categorized as high-grade NPCs, while Grandmaster Instructor NPCs were legendary NPCs. Only one of them would be present on any given continent. If a Grandmaster Instructor died, the system would automatically respawn one. However, it took a longer period of time to respawn such NPC. A total of 3 years' time in real time. Yi Si dragged Johnny's corpse into a ditch she dug out as she talked to herself. 3 years are actually quite short, they'll pass by in the blink of an eye, said Yi Si. She then turned around and asked, "OL, 3, what say you? Let's be more artistic, time passes quickly like a white pony's shadow across a crevice. 1, the passing of a millennium is just in the mere blink of an eye. Am I right, am I right? Even 1,000 years can pass in the blink of an eye, not to mention 3 years. It was uncertain if OL3 could understand Yi Si's words, but it was wagging its tails at her, acting all cute. With great effort, Yi Si threw Johnny into the ditch and covered him with soil. She then let out a long sigh. It was definitely not in vain. A legendary NPC's corpse would disappear in 18 months of real time upon its death, and an NPC with a similar tier would respawn in another 18 months. This meant that in the next 36 months, the East Continent would not have any Grandmaster Fisherman. If any life players, too, wanted to learn fishing skills from a grandmaster, she was sorry, but they could only look for one in the other 4 continents. And to leave the continent. Yi Si looked up into the sky, this really had nothing to do with her. Although she kept telling herself that, Yi Si still fulfilled her responsibility, and buried the body. If someone was to discover the death of the Grandmaster Fisherman, and noticed that an NPC of a similar tier did not respawn, they would definitely report it to the game officials, and God knows if they'd link the incident to her. She really had nothing to do with it. After properly burying Johnny's body, Yi Si picked up the fishing rod that nicked her hand earlier. It was an ordinary fishing rod. Yi Si immediately threw it away and began surveying the small call once again. She wanted to get out of the place. Of course, the scenery of the place was still beautiful. Birds were chirping happily and soft green grass covering the floor. If one ignored the mess that Yi Si and the python had created with the impact of their fall, the place was still beautiful. The trees would respawn soon anyways. Now, Yi Si needed to get out of this place. Yi Si took a final glance at the call before she hurriedly left the place as if it was haunted. There was only a narrow path leading away from the call, and Yi Si reached a small wooden house after jogging down the path. There was a sign on the door. Johnny's house. This Grandmaster Fisherman sure likes leaving his name everywhere. He even wrote his name on his house. Originally, she planned to leave as soon as possible, but Yi Si stopped as soon as she saw the house. That guy was a Grandmaster Fisherman, shouldn't he have something valuable? Yi Si walked into Johnny's house and began rummaging through the place. The interior of the house was simple, there was nothing of value. Yi Si then found a row of fishing rods and a fish basket at a corner of the house. She reached out and grabbed the closest one, and the system notification immediately chimed in, "Are you sure you want to choose this fishing rod? The fishing rod will be bound to you, and you will not be able to choose another fishing rod." Yi Si immediately chose the no option. This was it. The most valuable thing owned by a Grandmaster Fisherman was of course fishing rods. But there was such a big row of fishing rods, with stats that were unable to be seen, which one should she pick? Yi Si looked from left to right, and then from right to left, but she still couldn't make up her mind. Some of the fishing rods were glossy, some were surrounded with silvery sparkles, while others were delicate in design. Each and every one of them looked like a good choice. Although Yi Si had not learned fishing skills, she would be an idiot to just pass over something free. She wanted to pick the fishing rod with the best stats. Her sight laid on a fishing rod at the end of the rack. The fishing rod was dusty and it looked nothing out of the ordinary, but Yi Si just couldn't shake off the feeling that it was the one for her. "Are you sure you want to choose this fishing rod? This fishing rod will be bound to you, and you cannot choose another fishing rod," the system notification chimed in. Yi Si chose yes without hesitation. Even if the fishing rod was not something good, it did not matter too much anyways because Yi Si had not learned fishing skills. Besides, to have such a mediocre-looking rod in the midst of all the other delicate-looking ones, something was obviously off. With the fishing rod in hand, Yi Si could finally see its stats. Baleson's precious fishing rod bound orange equipment, unique double-handed attack. 447.672, attack speed. 3.0 can be equipped by Master Fisherman and above. Special attribute. Can breath underwater after equipping. Special attribute. Increase fishing skill mastery and fishing speed by 10%. Special attribute. 5% increased chance to encounter rare fishes. As expected of an orange equipment. Even if it served little use to Yi Si, its stats would drive any fishing life players mad. Yi Si was especially happy with the additional ability to breath underwater after equipping the fishing rod. However, it was a double-handed rod, which meant Yi Si could not equip any other weapons while equipping the rod. It meant she would have to sacrifice her ability to attack. Under this circumstances, Yi Xi could only visit the shallow waters, but had to stay away from the deeper areas. Despite that, Yi Xi wanted to try the orange equipment that she had obtained. She activated her brooch of deceit. She wanted to disguise herself as a master fisherman. Unfortunately, she received a notification telling her that the brooch of deceit could not allow her to replicate a skill that she had not learned yet, forcing her to give up. Yi Xi then picked up the fishing basket that was at the other corner of the house. It was a purple equipment, Johnny's fish basket. It was also bound to Yi Xi. The fish basket was somewhat like a backpack, with 48 slots for fishing-related items. With one stack of items per slot and 99 items of the same name per stack, the fishing basket's capacity was rather big. Regrettably, it was only for fishing-related items and could not be used as a normal backpack. Even though she could not put the two items to good use, Yi Xi was still happy. After all, she was satisfied just by looking at the grade of those items. Yi Xi continued to ransack the house looking for anything valuable, and after confirming that she'd scrounged through the entire house, she left. Of course, she did not forget to take down the sign hanging on the door. Yi Xi then summoned her steed and continued her way along the narrow path. The map was called the Desolate Lands and everywhere was barren except for the small patch of greenery that Yi Xi had left behind. Even the rays of light shining down were grim and gloomy. The place was a LVL 30 to LVL 40 leveling area, hosting the Desolate Tombs dungeons. A lot of players would be leveling up in this map in the near future. But with the average level of players below 20 at this time and as such, not a single soul could be seen in the Desolate Lands. Yi Xi rode along the main road, wary of the monsters spawning at both sides of the road. Yi Xi suddenly fell from her steed, and was hit with dizziness. She was rooted to the spot and could not move. It was a situation that Yi Xi was familiar with. She was under attack by a player. You have been attacked by an unknown player, the system notification then chimed in. There was only one possibility when the notification hinted that a player was attacked by an unknown player. The assailant had hidden his name. Yi Xi eyed the debuff. It was staggering blow. The effect lasted for 6 seconds. It was a rogue skill. But where did the rogue came from? It was very unlikely for players to appear in the Desolate Lands at this time, and even if there were any players, Yi Xi was not a red-named player. Why would they attack her? She felt a chilly pain at her back. Yi Xi could see her HP dropping rapidly. 6 seconds seemed short, but in this situation, it felt like a millennia for Yi Xi. Players under the stunned status could not move. Yi Xi could only watch as her HP dropped. She was filled with remorse. Why did she went so fast? If only she did not dismiss OL3, then she'd not be at the mercy of her assailant. The rogue was fast. He cast one skill after another on Yi Xi. Bleed, assassinate, searing stab, eviscerate. Within 6 seconds, he had almost finished using all his main skills on Yi Xi. What surprised him the most was that despite dealing more than hundreds of damage, the huntress did not fall. She had also hidden her personal info, which meant that the rogue could not see her HP bar. Why was she so hard to kill? In truth, Yi Xi was not that well off. If it were not for the equipment she had, she would have been killed instantly after receiving damage from so many of the rogue's skills. When the effect of staggering blow was finally over, Yi Xi activated the dash ability of her boots and dashed away. Translator notes. 1. Time passes quickly like a white pony's shadow across a crevice. A Chinese saying describing how fast time passes. 2. Life players focusing on life skills.